Hi everyone, Eric here from Whose Turn Board Games, and today I'm going to be showing you how to set up and play the game Earth. Now Earth is a 1 to 5 player game and is an engine builder, and it's a little on the complex side, so just a heads up there. That being said, there is a solo variant of this one. I will not be showing that in this particular playthrough, so if you want to see that, go ahead and check out. I will probably be doing it at some point, but this video will not cover the solo play at all. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So I'm going to start off by doing this. I'm going to show you kind of what all comes with the box. I don't usually do that, but this one has everything on two sides. There's a reason for that, and I also really enjoy it, but it is really confusing when you first open the box. So just want to give a quick breakdown of everything that's going to be on each side. As you see here, this is going to be just artwork. The other side will actually be the player board. So you can disregard the other side. It's really pretty, but it doesn't actually do anything for the game. There are two boards that are like this. One side of one of the player boards will look like this. This is for the solo variant. This is how you play against the AI, or Gaia, as it were. This player board looks similar to everything else, but it does have stuff both above and below. This is also for the solo variant. The last thing that's on the double-sided one is going to be the teams, and you can play this game in team. It does tell you how to do that, but again, will not be covered in this particular video. So the last side that's going to be a little bit different is going to be the fauna board. As you see on this side, it has 4 spots. And on the back it has 6. The biggest difference is just going to be, as you see, the point value, as well as there's only 4 versus 6. It does recommend playing with just the 4 one on the very first one, is represented by this one. I'll be setting it up as this for the very first time. After you play it the first time and kind of know what you're doing, you will be playing with the 6-sided ones. There are going to be a lot of different cards overall. These particular ones are going to be the solo player ones and will not be used when playing with multiple people. They do say solo mode at the top, so if you're playing with multiple people, disregard them. Those are all the player boards and all the double-sided on those. There are going to be cards that are two-sided as well, but ultimately it doesn't matter. They all work the same way. They're color-coded. It gives you a little bit more options instead of giving you more cards, and I kind of like that actually. So once each player has a player board in front of them, you set up the fauna board depending on if it's your first time through or your subsequent playthroughs. There is going to be one thing here. It's a first-person marker token. It's the circle. Does not matter which side it is. It's randomly chosen. We generally just kind of pick whoever is the most experienced to go first if they're teaching new people. So the other one that comes through is going to be the active token marker, and again, this is going to be two-sided. It does not matter which side you use. There are multiple different colored leaves. It doesn't matter which color everyone wants to be, so go ahead and pick a color to start. I will be using yellow and blue for this example. Next up, you're going to be dealing everybody who's playing an island card, so it's going to be represented by the top blue. At the very top there, it does say island on the card itself. They are two-sided, so you can choose from either side. The game does say to give each player 1, but we like to give each player 2 just to kind of give them some options. You're going to do the same thing with the climate card. They are notated with the orangish, reddish top here, and does say climate. Same exact thing. Game says give 1 to everybody. I typically give 2 to everybody, and they are double-sided. Next up is going to be the ecosystem card. You do shuffle the deck together and then give each player only 1 this time of the ecosystem cards. These are also double-sided, and they are represented by the darker green at the top. They do say ecosystem on them. Each player gets 1, and they can choose whichever one they like. This is purely for bonus points at the end of the game. The last thing you're going to do is shuffle up the brown fauna cards, which are again double-sided. As such, you're going to be randomly placing them on the fauna board off to the side, and it does not matter which side you have up. You can go ahead and flip them up. You can look at them all and change them however you want to. It doesn't matter. You just randomly take 4. Randomly choose which side to play. Now, as such, you do deal all of these things out at first, and people then can choose what to have for their island, their climate, and which side they'd like to use for the ecosystem. It doesn't matter overall what they do, but they will do all of these things before they draw any cards or go any further. So you do want to kind of review what's out on the board and see what's going on with that. So once everybody has chosen their particular island, their climate, as well as their ecosystem bonus cards, you then look at your island card, and you draw that as many cards as this symbol says. It's a little hand with a card icon. And then you will compost however many cards has a hand with a circle on it. So for example, this particular one has 11, and they will compost 3. So players will take turns drawing cards from the Flora deck. This is a combined communal deck overall. You can have 1 deck, as I have here, multiple, whatever you'd like to do. There will be a discard one as well, so try to keep them a little bit separated for that. So on the player board, there is a spot for the island, the climate, as well as the ecosystem. This particular icon is the compost pile. So as stated, you would draw as many cards as is indicated on your island that you choose to start with, and then compost the remaining. It should be noted that the compost pile is not the active discard pile. You get points for every card in your compost, but the discard pile is entirely separate, so just keep that in mind. The last thing you would do is get dirt, which is also indicated at the bottom of the island. That is currency for the game. So this particular instance, it's 6, so they would get 6 dirt, put it on their player board. Now they are ready to go. And that's set up. Players will then take turns choosing one of 4 actions on the top in order to build a 4x4 grid called an island and activate abilities as such. Each player will choose which color they'd like to activate, and then every other player will choose their actions based on what color they've chosen. Now before I go any further, I am going to give you an example of a card and kind of explain what everything is, as well as what the green cubes are off to the side here, and what these little icons are as well. For an example of a card, if you look in the upper left, it'll say the cost of dirt. Again, that's the currency. Everything on the top part here is going to be the climate, and there's one of 4 options. That's typically just used for bonuses, so you can kind of disregard that. It then gives you the card type. Again, there are 4 different types of flora cards. There is also a terrain card and event cards, but I'll show you those a little later. It gives you the name of the card itself, as well as a scientific name. Over here, the leaf is going to be the points for the card. As you see, there are also points for the island and the climate, so be aware of those. This big green circle is going to be the growth. Each card can have a number of growth up to a maximum of what this little brown number is. If they hit that maximum, they then get the white number for the maximum number of points. These leaves on the bottom are for sprouts. Sprouts act as points at the end of the game, and only certain cards can have them, as well as only so many on each card. The very bottom would have a color, and that color will dictate what you do for abilities. I'll go more into abilities a little bit later. It should be noted that green, red, blue, and yellow abilities all activate when someone chooses that particular action. As such, brown is only used for points at the end of the game, or to passively adjust something like reduce the soil cost of particular cards. Black cards are a one-time use. You get the whatever the action is on the card, and then it is spent. It does not happen again. So that's a rundown of the cards. It should be noted at the bottom of each player board, it does show you all of the icons as well as what they do, so use that as a reference. It does also show you how you get points for the very end of the game. I'm not going to cover each of the actions in turn, as well as what they do, as well as what everyone else does. The green action, planting. When you plant, you are able to place 2 cards from your hand onto your 4x4 grid in some capacity. When you lay your first card down, it doesn't actually matter where it is. You just have to pretend that it's somewhere in a 4x4 grid. You can then lay any subsequent cards down in any order, but they have to be in some way, shape, or form touching this card. They can be diagonal, up and down, left to right, doesn't matter. You can no longer go left and right in any capacity once you have 4 cards out. So just keep that in mind. 4 up, 4 down makes a 4x4 grid. Science. Green is the only option that lets you actually plant onto your island, so keep that in mind. If you choose that action, at the very top it shows you lay down 2. You then draw 4 cards from the deck, choose one of them, and discard the rest. That one that you choose goes into your hand to be played at any point. Now it should be noted at this point, if you see at the top of the boards, it has 1 player on one side and multiple people on the other. So when someone chooses that as their action, they get the top part of the actions. Everybody else gets the bottom part. So if I were to choose green as my action, every other player will get to also lay 1 card and draw 1 card off the deck. They then activate any abilities in their island. I'll be explaining abilities after the rest of these actions. The next action you can take is the red action, and that is composting. When you choose the red action, whoever chooses it gets 5 dirt from the supply, as well as 2 cards from the deck into their compost pile. They do not look at these cards. They just take the top 2 cards, put them into their deck. Every other player also gets to choose to either take 2 dirt, or again, add 2 cards from the deck onto their compost pile. Then every player activates all of their actions on their island. The blue action, watering. When you take the blue action, you take 6 cubes from the supply and place them wherever you can onto cards that have open spaces. You also then take 2 dirt from the supply and add it to your board. It should be noted, you have to put the cubes directly onto the cards that you have. You cannot add them to your player board and then later put them on there when there's space. They are immediately played onto any open spaces. If there is none, they are discarded. This is a good time to point out on every single board it does say -3 cubes plus 2 dirt. You can choose at any point in time to take 3 cubes off of any one card and then get 2 dirt from the supply. The only time this cannot happen is when you immediately choose the blue action. When you choose blue, you have to have all 6 play out. So if you were to, for example, choose the blue action, you'd get 6 cubes, but here you'd only have room for 4. You cannot lay down 4, choose to burn 3 to get 2 dirt, and then take the other 2. You forfeit any cubes you are not able to place immediately. Likewise, if you were to have, for example, 3 cubes on here and you wanted to go blue, before you declare going blue, you can burn these 3 to get the 2 dirt, and then get the 6 more cubes to put right back onto it. That is allowed, you can just not do it in the middle of taking the cubes for blue. After you have chosen blue, every other person can choose to either take 2 cubes or 2 dirt, and then activates all of their blue abilities. Yellow, growing. When you choose yellow, you get to draw 4 cards from the top of the deck and add them to your hand, as well as grow 2 sprouts on any spot that has sprout availability. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this one has a maximum of 4, which could give you 5 points if you were to max it out. If I were to have 2 on there and I went on yellow to get 2 more, the final one would also get a canopy. Canopies indicate that you have maxed out the number of growth on that particular card. It's just for reference, just for easy counting at the very end of it. Every single trunk that you have on the actual card itself is worth 1 point. When you put the canopy on, you then have to go off of the white score on the card. So whoever chooses yellow will get the 4 cards and the 2 growth. Everybody else can choose either 2 cards or 2 growth, depending on what they like to do. They then activate all of their abilities, all of their yellow abilities. As I've stated throughout this, that is how you choose your actions you like to take. As far as activating abilities, as I've stated throughout it, every single time a person chooses a color, they do the color on the board and then activate it on their abilities. Abilities are anything on their particular island that they've placed that represent that color. So if you have anything for green, anytime anybody chooses green, you go off of your board, you do whatever the board, your climate or island say first, and then you activate your particular island going from top left to bottom right. So you'd be going just like you read. So for example, let's say this particular player chose blue. After choosing the 6 cubes, the 2 dirt, they would then check their island and see if they have a blue ability. They do not. From the island they go to the climate, and then you can choose to compost a card from their hand to get 1 dirt. If they do that, they then go to their island and starting in the top left spot, do any blue abilities from the top left row across, and then the next column, the next row, so on and so forth. So here they could sacrifice 1 growth to get 3 cubes. And in this one they could pay 1 dirt and 1 cube in order to get both a growth and an extra card. So after every single one of their blue abilities has been resolved on their island, their turn is resolved. Simple as that. We're done. If they were to choose red, they would start again with this particular card as it's in the topmost row, and then they work their way down to this one. It should be noted that you do not need to play any abilities if you do not want to. However, in order to get the reward for this particular one, they need to sacrifice 1 growth to get 2 dirt. You have to sacrifice the number on the left-hand side in order to get the reward on the right, but you can choose up to how many of the reward on the right you'd like to take. This is only important for when you hit capacity and you can no longer do it. Otherwise, I really don't see a point why you'd never take anything. It just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it makes sense to you. Maybe I'm just maybe I've made all the wrong life choices in my life. So that's how you activate the abilities. As I've stated earlier, the black are the one-offs, so this one would only get the 7 cubes once and then never be used again. This particular one, again, would make any tree that this player would play cost 1 less soil in there as long as it was in their tile. So players continue to take turns until someone has built their entire 4x4 grid of an island. Once that happens, everybody will continue to take the equal number of turns as whoever started. So if, for example, I were to on this side end the game, the other player would then also be able to choose to go 1 last time for any of their actions on the top. I would also activate any of my abilities that I'd be able to do, but the equal number of turns would be available. I'll now touch base on the fauna cards because they're primarily used just for scoring at the end of the game. Each one of the fauna cards will actually have a little objective to hit at the very bottom, and once you hit that particular objective, you instantly place one of your leaves on the board next to that particular fauna. As you see on this particular one, all points are the same. That's because it is the first time you should be playing with it. It does kind of make it a little bit easier. So just a heads up there. When you start getting familiar with it, there will be more points for getting on there first, less points for going on there last. That being said, when the very first person is able to finish their 4x4 grid, they do get an extra 7 points, and it would be represented by putting their leaf there. Last thing I want to mention about this game is going to be the event cards. The event cards can be played instantly as long as you can pay its cost. Again, it does have a little colon, so you have to pay the 5 cubes in order to get the reward of drawing a card and composting 8 cards into your compost. They are played instantly from your hand, and you can do them the second you draw them as long as you're able to pay their cost. If you cannot pay their cost, you cannot use the events. So just a heads up there. So once you're tallying up your scoring, you're going to end up taking the total points of all of the leaves for every single card, including your island and climate. You take any points gained or lost from the event cards. You take 1 point for every card in your compost pile. 1 point per sprout on your cards. You get victory points from growth. So again, for the canopies, you take the white colors. If there is no canopy, it's 1 point per trunk. Victory points from any terrain cards. You then look at your ecosystem, and based on what your goal was for that particular one, you get points based on that. And finally, you take any victory points you were to get from the fauna cards and add them to your total. Whoever has the most points after tallying everything up wins the game. If there's a tie, it goes to whoever has the most soil on their player board in reserve. If there's still a tie, it goes to the number of cards in hand. If it's still tied, it goes to the number of growth on the cards on your island. If it's still tied, it goes to the number of sprouts on the cards in your island. If it's still tied, it goes to the number of cards composted in your compost. If it's still tied, don't do that. Just don't. Don't do that. Don't tie games. But seriously, play again. You're tied. Congratulations. And that's Earth. It's just a fun game. It's one of my favorites right now. I'm playing it as often as I can. Absolutely love it. And since there's so many combinations of everything, you're never going to play the same game twice. It's awesome. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I explained it well. Like I said, it's a lot in this game, so I'm really hoping that I did it well. I hope I did it justice. Let me know in the comments below if you're still a little lost, if you have questions. By all means, I'll answer them the best I can. It's just because it is a confusing game. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you want to subscribe, go right ahead. We make other board game content kind of like this, where we set up games, play them. We do have playthroughs of games to kind of see how they're done, and also just to kind of have fun while we're doing all this stuff, so consider subscribing if that's your jelly and or jam. Thank you all for watching. I've been Eric, and until next time, whose turn? I don't know how you tie that much. I don't think that'd be possible. Could you do it? Why? Why would you do that? Why would you want to? I want to win, not tie. Don't do that.